So, will the very water you have today even exist tomorrow? It's a pretty jarring question, right? But honestly, with all the massive demographic shifts, environmental wear and tear, and breakneck development happening right now, the certainty of our future water supply is genuinely on thin ice. We're looking at a future where water scarcity could very well be the single greatest challenge we face as a society.
Just think about the sheer scale of the mismatch we're dealing with here. India currently supports over 17% of the entire global population. Yet, it occupies just 2.45% of the world's surface area and, here's the kicker, possesses a mere 4% of the world's water resources. We're literally talking about supporting a massive chunk of humanity with just a tiny sliver of the globe's water.
Welcome to today's Explainer. We're going to completely unpack this wild tension between supply and demand and figure out exactly how one of the most populated nations on Earth manages its absolute most vital resource. We'll be diving into the raw data, the reality of depletion, and ultimately the path forward.
Okay, let's map this out. We've got 4 main stops today. First, the Great Water Paradox. Second, where does it all go? Third, depletion and deteriorating quality. And lastly, strategies for sustainable survival. Let's get right into it.
Starting off with Section 1, the Great Water Paradox. High population, limited supply. We really need to wrap our heads around the absolute, unyielding physical limits of water in the country. So if you look at the total water available from precipitation in India over a single year, it's roughly 4,000 cubic kilometers. Now, that sounds like a massive amount, doesn't it? But because of topographical and hydrological constraints, we actually can't use all of it. Actually, scratch that. We can't use most of it. The truly crucial number is 1,122 cubic kilometers. That right there is the total utilizable water resource for the entire country. It's a hard, unyielding physical ceiling.
And what makes this hard limit even trickier is the intense spatial variation. The water just isn't spread out evenly. For instance, the river basins of the Ganga, Brahmaputra, and Barak, they only account for about 1/3 of the country's total area, but they hold a whopping 60% of the total surface water. Meanwhile, you have these vast tracts like the Deccan Plateau in northwestern India that are highly drought-prone. It's literally extreme abundance living right next door to severe scarcity.
Which naturally brings us to Section 2. Where does it all go? Unpacking India's water demand. If these resources are so limited and localized, what exactly is draining them? Well, India's current water demand is utterly dominated by one single sector. If you look at surface water utilization, a staggering 89% goes directly to agriculture. Domestic use takes up about 9%, and industry, just 2%. So that massive agricultural slice just completely dwarfs everything else.
And you know, the picture is actually even more extreme beneath the soil. When it comes to groundwater, agriculture consumes an incredible 92% of everything utilized. Industry takes 5%, and domestic use makes up that tiny remainder. So whether we're talking about rivers above ground or aquifers below, agriculture is the absolute, undeniable center of the water demand puzzle.
But why? Why does farming need so much water? Well, it makes total sense when you break it down. First, like we just saw, rainfall is incredibly variable across both space and time, plus the winter and summer seasons are mostly dry. So to farm year-round and actually pull off multiple cropping, you absolutely need assured irrigation. Second, a lot of the staple crops, think rice, sugarcane, and jute, they just naturally drink up a ton of water. And finally, those high-yielding crop varieties from the Green Revolution, which were amazing for boosting productivity in places like Punjab and Haryana, yeah, they require a super regular, consistent moisture supply to work their magic.
All right, so we've got a fixed supply and a practically bottomless agricultural demand. That brings us to Section 3, depletion and deteriorating quality. Basically, the breaking point.
Here's the harsh reality. The per capita availability of water is shrinking day by day just from population growth alone. But here's the real kicker. We aren't just running out of water. We are actively ruining the water we have left. Our available water resources are getting severely polluted by industrial waste, agricultural runoff like fertilizers and insecticides, and everyday domestic solid and liquid wastes.
The Central Pollution Control Board keeps a constant eye on these aquatic resources, and honestly, their data is deeply concerning. Organic and bacterial contamination is just widespread across the map. The Yamuna, specifically the stretch between Delhi and Etawah, unfortunately holds the grim title of the most polluted river in the country.
But this crisis definitely spreads outward, from the Sabarmati at Ahmedabad to the Gumti at Lucknow, all the way to the Ganga at Kanpur and Varanasi. And during the summer when water flow naturally drops, these pollutants concentrate to dangerously high levels.
And the crisis beneath the soil? Just as alarming. In states like Punjab, Haryana, and western UP, massive irrigation through wells and tube wells has triggered a rapid, really dangerous drop in groundwater tables. But overpumping doesn't just dry up the wells, it literally draws out hidden toxins. This overwithdrawal has spiked fluoride concentrations in the groundwater in places like Rajasthan and Maharashtra, and driven up arsenic levels in parts of West Bengal and Bihar. We're talking about severe social and health disruptions directly tied to how we manage water.
So, we've seen the paradox, the overwhelming demand, and the depletion. Now, let's pivot to Section 4, Strategies for Sustainable Survival. Because it's time to talk about how we actually turn this tide.
The central government is definitely deploying some heavy-hitting, systemic solutions to tackle this, especially focusing on that massive agricultural demand. One of the biggest initiatives is the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, or PMKSY. Their goals are super targeted. First, Har Khet Ko Pani, which basically means expanding physical access to assured irrigation for every farm. Second, per drop more crop, leveraging technology to massively improve water efficiency on the farm itself. And third, introducing genuinely sustainable conservation practices across the entire sector.
Another foundational strategy being pushed all over the country is watershed management. This is all about the efficient management, conservation, and regeneration of not just water, but all natural resources, land, plants, the whole shebang, within a specific basin. It's about balancing natural resources with the needs of the society living there. But here is the absolute crucial key to this entire concept. Its success depends almost entirely on community participation. Without the buy-in of local folks, it simply doesn't work. But you know, when communities do step up to the plate, the results are just incredible. Take the Haryali project, for example. It's run by Gram Panchayats and empowers rural populations to conserve water for drinking, fisheries, and even afforestation. Then in Andhra Pradesh, you got the Niru Miru program, which is heavily focused on building water harvesting structures like ponds and percolation tanks. And over in Alwar, Rajasthan, the Arvari Pani Sansad relies completely on the community to build check dams and dugout ponds, which are locally known as johads. These aren't just dry government bullet points. These are real, local efforts that are actively bringing the environment back to life.
Sometimes the best way forward is actually to look back. Rainwater harvesting is an amazing, centuries-old, eco-friendly technique used to capture rain and bridge that terrifying demand-supply gap. For example, out in the harsh, dry climate of rural Rajasthan, people have traditionally constructed kunds or tankas. These are covered underground tanks built right near or even inside their homes to safely store harvested rainwater. Readopting these brilliant, low-cost traditional methods is honestly one of the most powerful ways we can build modern resilience.
Building mass awareness is also a massive priority right now. Under the Jal Kranti Abhiyan, launched back in 2015-16, the government introduced this concept of the Jal Gram. The whole idea is to pick one highly water-stressed village in each of the 672 districts across the country and totally transform it into a model of water security. By cleaning up pollution, building arsenic-free wells, and setting up artificial recharge systems, these model villages are there to prove a vital point. True livelihood and food security are absolutely impossible without water security first.
Finally, to really target the hardest-hit areas, we have the Atal Bhujal Yojana, or Atal Jal. It's currently rolling out across over 8,200 water-stressed gram panchayats in 7 different states. But the ultimate goal of this huge scheme isn't just about pouring concrete and building out infrastructure. The core mission, the real game changer here, is driving a fundamental behavioral change. It's about shifting millions of people away from an attitude of pure consumption and towards an attitude of deep daily conservation.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. We've seen the data. The gap between supply and demand is widening every day, and climate change is only adding fuel to the fire. Sure, things like desalination and interlinking rivers are massive, ambitious remedies. But at the end of the day, looking at this from the ground level of individual households and communities, the most critical lever we have might just be how we personally value this resource. Can individual behavioral changes, combined with the strategic pricing of water, close that widening gap before it's too late? That is a question every single one of us needs to answer. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what you see.